Hello and welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your host, Buddy Sotelo Esquire, Mike Lano, and Evan Ginsberg. Evan, would you like to introduce our guest for tonight?
Absolutely. I just hung out with him in San Diego, California, as well as with Mike Lano in San Diego, California, and he is Rick Newman from the You Know It's Fake Right Facebook page, the admin, and he's a avid wrestling fan, journalist, historian, whatnot, and we're going to talk Royal Rumble and everything else tonight, and also do a nice tribute to Jay Briscoe, who was a favorite of ours, and very tragic set of events. But
Evan, I was trying to think of how many times you brought him to Legends, at least once, if not twice.
Yeah, we did 8 years of shows, Legends Radio, weekly. So that's 400 plus shows. So it's all kind of a blur, to be honest. But we did have him on, and I met him a few times over at Ring of Honor at the Hammerstein in New York. Just a very surprisingly soft-spoken. Just a decent guy, very accommodating, very warm, friendly. He was 38. I'm much older than him, and every time I would speak to him, he would go, "Sir." Just very respectful. Made me feel old, but just a decent guy and a great performer. I went to pretty much every Ring of Honor show from 2007 to probably 2015 before they kind of went corporate, and he great performers, the Briscoes, and he was their solo champion as well. Well, what do you have to say, Rick?
If I could just rewind for just 1 second, I want to thank you very much for that gracious introduction. I know you called me a journalist, but that is very generous of you, but that is what you gentlemen are. I do not have the credentials that you gentlemen certainly do have. I've never published anything. I do love professional wrestling. I follow it passionately. It's funny. My wife, when I told her I was going to be on this podcast, she asked about who was going to, who hosted it and everything like that. And she wanted to Google it, shows interest. And so when she Googled you guys, she was like, why do these guys think you are? Why do they want you on their podcast? Who the heck do they?
Yeah, but then you probably Googled my information.
I got your vote of ribbon, and we were talking about. I gave you a call trying to figure out. I couldn't remember whose number it was. I wrote down. I go, Evan's friend, and we talked a little about Ring of Honor. You knew Jay Briscoe. You saw him in action because you lived on the East Coast, right? And you got
I mean, I never knew the man personally, like you guys did, but I am a huge fan of his. As I said, but I was fortunate enough to see him in the infancy of his career, and the very early days of Ring of Honor. I got to see in a high school gym. I believe it's so early on now. I believe it was in Deer Park High School. I got to see him wrestle the Amazing Red. I could be, and it's been so long now, I could be starting to confuse things I got in tape grade and things I'd actually seen live. But, I was watching just today. I don't know if any of you gentlemen got to see where they live streamed the funeral. And seeing Mark speak, he was so upbeat in talking about him. And, it got me to thinking and watching what I saw early on. He was 19 years old. And to see these amazing matches, and just last year or this past year, for him to, at 19 and at 38, be putting on these amazing matches as the match of the year match they had in that dog collar match, which definitely did not win out of sympathy. That was going to be the match of the year either way.
It was great.
And he was just such an incredible performer. And, I was saying earlier, when speaking about Jay Briscoe, there's so many people, if they weren't familiar with Ring of Honor, if they only watched mainstream wrestling, they may never know what they lost, what they, never got to, appreciate. which I guess is something that's always happened in various, forms of art. There's artists that never get appreciated till after they're gone, and I guess Jay Briscoe is going to be one of those, tragic stories. And of course, that's not the most tragic thing in this. There's, children who were hurt and, thank God they didn't also lose their lives. But, he's just such a tremendous performer, and both, tag team and in singles, a tremendous champion in his own right. And, again, thank you for that tremendous introduction you gave me, Evan. I'm not sure whether or not I deserve it. I'm humbled by it.
There you go. I just want to throw something in here. I was very, very surprised the past week or so that so many people did not know the Briscoes because they didn't get Ring of Honor on TV or they didn't attend their live shows. And, people kept saying, is that Jerry Briscoe's son? Is that Jack Briscoe's son? They had no idea. And
I talked to him, but I never asked him why they picked that name. Why, Evan or Rick, do you know why they picked the Briscoe name and added an E on it? I mean, they couldn't have been fans of Jack and Jerry.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I had always assumed that it was. In fact, I didn't realize until Evan pointed out to me that they had changed the spelling. I'd never realized it all this time, if I'm being completely honest, and I felt really silly.
But it's just surprise. It's like Ring of Honor is like a world unto itself. And if you're a WWE fan who quote unquote hates AEW, you're not seeing their version of Ring of Honor. And I mean, the fans that knew the Briscoes loved them and appreciated them. And then there's a whole world of people, they were kind of under the radar. And
but at least the companies, by WWE first on NXT and obviously Impact and AEW, and they were able to finally convince Tony Khan, the owners of TNT and TBS, to allow that what they did with Jay Lethal against Mark Briscoe and the nice video. Were you saying that? Did they show in the the AEW tribute that's free on YouTube and on their Ring of Honor Club, honorclub.com site, the funeral footage, or is that something?
The funeral.
It's on YouTube. The funeral.
The funeral, really?
Yeah, it was today.
Yeah.
It's just been put on YouTube, and it's very, very moving.
I mean, New Japan and I think Noah both have done pretty major tributes over there at show's start. So I think people that know quality wrestling, I mean, I was lucky to have shot quite a few. The only time they came out to the West Coast, they didn't shoot them, was at that Cow Palace 2007 fiasco. But at one of Mike Bucci's High Spots WrestleCons, I think it was the 2011 one, the Briscoes had a tremendous, I gave it almost 5 stars, against the Kings of Wrestling, Claudio and Chris Hero.
I saw that. That match in the
probably saw it a million times, right?
Yeah, the Briscoes. Let me just say this to give fans a reference point. I've been going to wrestling since 1974. That's almost 50 years attending. And when I think of the greatest wrestling I've ever seen, I would say the NWA in the 80s. Crockett, Flair Steamboat, Flair Terry Funk, etc. But in those 50 years, I would say the second best wrestling I ever saw was Ring of Honor circa 2008 when Nigel McGuinness was the champ. They were so loaded with talent, Kevin Steen and Claudio, and I'm juggling the names, WWE names, Ring of Honor names, but inevitably, as great as all of these guys were, Tyler Black, aka Seth Rollins, as great as these guys were, many a show, the Briscoes would steal the show. They were just dynamic. And I honestly mean this. I'm not saying this because he just died. I rate them among the 20 greatest tag teams of all time. Every night they came out and killed. They came out and killed every night.
But literally, that's how they wrestled, though. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen. It was like two Bruiser Brodies They're just nonstop attack. They
could wrestle, they could brawl, they could fly, they bleed, they had charisma, they had a unique look.
The interviews, particularly Jay, everybody's citing his eyes. You see when he do those promos, the eyes were such a big.
It was like a dark almost,
Yeah. Then he did redneck kung fu, which was a great gimmick, And let me throw this into the mix. I would rank them among the 10 greatest legit brother tag teams.
Easily.
The Valiant brothers, the Grahams, they weren't real brothers. Among the, I'm talking the Tolless brothers and legit brothers. These
Funks, Briscoes.
Funks, Briscoes, etc. Vashons. I mean, these guys never had a bad match.
Yeah, Steiners,
yeah.
I never saw. They must have had Briscoes versus. I'm sorry, both of you guys, Rick and Evan. The Briscoes must have faced the Young Bucks. I never saw it on TV.
Oh, yeah.
Those matches must have been off the charts, right?
Yeah, tremendous. And I'm a big fan. For an old school guy or an old guy, I'm a big fan of the Young Bucks, and I don't really quite get the hatred some people have of them. Yeah, maybe the 37th super kick is overkill, but the Young Bucks are great. And when they wrestled the Briscoes, they tore the house down.
I've watched the Young Bucks as you did with the Briscoes because Jay was on the very first Ring of Honor show. He was like 17, and Mark was too young to wrestle, so he couldn't be on it. But you watched their evolution like I was able to watch, the Young Bucks grow, particularly in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, and then they would come up, they did a couple of BTW shows and worked some NorCal shows, but we really saw them flourish well before they got to Impact using different names. And then obviously, they just went insane with Ring of Honor and New Japan growing, as did the Briscoes. And I think Jay said quite a few times how proud he was to have wrestled in New Japan. But didn't they also work in Noah? They got to work 2 promotions. First Noah and then later New Japan.
I believe so.
But
yeah, Riccaboni had cited that earlier when they had the match earlier, Mark's match with Jay last week. They said that they were in Noah as teenagers. He was saying on commentary last week.
He's a good announcer. He's a very good announcer.
He's excellent. I really enjoy Ian Riccaboni very much.
When you watch WWE, as I unfortunately did last night, these announcers are like a pounding in your head. And is it okay to segue, Russ?
Yeah, but you're talking about Royal Rumble last night.
Sure. No, we can go in and out of our Briscoe trivia.
So, all right, Jay Briscoe from the line. The other subject that everybody's talking about is Royal Rumble, and one of the things I noticed as I was watching it, the Women's Rumble comes on, and you have Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan. Liv Morgan's a former champion there, and the announcers are only talking about Rhea Ripley. They could have just announced, here's the winner. Here's the winner of the Women's Royal Rumble, the way they were hyping her and ignoring pretty much the former world's champion, which is the theme of the Royal Rumble that I just want to touch on, that every single match, every single result was absolutely, utterly predictable. And the spin among the fans and even some of the journalists is they're advancing storylines. No. You shouldn't know the result of every single match on a 4-hour show. It's not the way that wrestling goes. And Cody Rhodes, who I'm a big fan of, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan. It's like, for the guy who's quote unquote supposed to win the Rumble, why have him come out 30th where it's so obvious? I mean,
there's a case of going over is not as good as or getting over. And the Gunther got Walter, still call him Walter, got over. But of course, Cody went over, coming out 30th, whereas Gunther was the first guy out there. He lasted the entire. I haven't watched the pay-per-view. I only watched the beginning of it. So I'm going to ask Evan and Rick some questions. But so yeah, those things. That's the marketing. We all knew that Rhea and Cody were going to win if Rock was not going to be in it, and the crowd must have been slumped not getting Rock. Nobody's hardly addressed that.
Also, Sammy didn't come in the Royal Rumble. So.
Yeah, that just never happened.
Wasn't Roman saying he was going to be stuck to the hip with Sammy to prevent Sammy from getting somehow into the Rumble?
No, he just wasn't in the Rumble, and it was very clear Cody was going to win. So,
well, what about this though? For the 2 nights of Mania, night 1, Roman possibly against Sammy. Night 2, Roman defends the title versus one or both. Now they're talking about having him just defend one of the titles against Cody and dropping it. And
then there's the Elimination Chamber prior, I believe, so he might wrestle Sammy there. He's not going to wrestle 2 guys in 2 nights.
Well, then what are you going to do for the 2 nights? What's going to be the main event? Obviously, the biggest main event will be Roman Cody, maybe night 2. But then you can't bring Austin back for another main event night 1.
Vince McMahon comes in
he was coming back. At least at this point, he would have been on the Raw 30. They didn't have him live there, thankfully. But then the other thing is maybe what would end night number 1 would be Steen or Kevin Owens and Sammy versus the 2 Usos. So let me ask you 2 guys, Evan and Rick, was it Jay Uso who walked out, didn't want to take part in the beatdown of?
That was Jay. I've been enjoying the whole Jay Uso thing, from the beginning, and the whole Sammy thing. That's been great. The one thing that I thought was missing,
none of that's predictable. What led to Sammy taking a chair and hitting Roman though? What that I don't know.
The whole thing with that, he was beating on Kevin Owens. I've been such a fan of his for so long. I'm sure you guys have too. I know you guys were fans of Ring of Honor and PWG. So I'm sure you guys love Kevin Steen also.
No, I know Kevin well before he was ever put on WWE TV. When he was coming up, he was at that WrestleMania in San Jose, the 2015 one.
Yeah, I love him so much. And the one thing I felt was missing, and I don't love gore and blood. I just felt like this needed it, because it was like Roman was, they were brutalizing Kevin, and he was still loyal to him, but it was like, no, now I can't anymore. I can't stand by and watch you do this to my brother anymore, and now I need to turn on you. You forced my hand, And for some reason,
so Sammy was conflicted, right? Was that how it?
Exactly.
Really portraying it well. I thought it was great. It's been so long since something that they put on WWE TV got me emotionally invested. Really
absolutely. This was the first
so angle. Rare that someone could do that.
It's the first angle
I've really did it great. But I think that without blood, especially because I've seen him in so many other places. And I know that these guys together especially pour buckets of blood, and so I feel
Steen bled Jay Briscoe. No. He bled in a singles match with Jay Briscoe.
Yeah, that's who Jay Briscoe won his first world title from. That was one of my favorite singles matches that I ever saw live. I was at that at the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City. It was amazing. In fact, I had always, up until last week or the week before, whenever that tragedy happened, I had always thought of that as a Kevin Steen memory. Even though it was Jay Briscoe winning the world title, it was like, oh, he's going to go to the big time now. This was like, him giving it like, but, I digress. But yeah, for some reason, the one thing I thought that was missing, and I know WWE, they don't do blood, but I felt like that segment was missing gore. Not gore, but Kevin bleeding.
Yep.
In that part would have, was the only thing really missing from it.
Yes.
Everything else-
It was the best WWE angle since Bryan Danielson had that run towards the championship. It's the first time I've cared in about 10 years. It was a good angle.
Well, let me bring in Russ. Let me just say and ask Russ his thoughts on this, because to have somebody organically accepted and demanded almost by the audience, from Bryan Danielson to Kofi Kingston and now Sammy, do you see Sammy in that light? I mean, he, from what everybody says, the end of the pay-per-view, he was more over than Cody, even though Cody's getting the main event. But Russ, any thoughts? Do you think that Sami Zayn is in that lineage of a regular-looking guy from Bryan Danielson to Kofi Kingston and now Sammy? That's what I'm thinking.
I think the fans really want to see him get a run. They've had, so much Brock Lesnar for so long, and Roman Reigns being sort of the main guy, and he, Zayn really is kind of been on the out. They've never really given him the kind of run that I think they've given some of the other.
He is now. He's the hottest guy in the company.
Right now, he's the hottest guy. But it's taken, obviously, when Vince was truly in control, he just never wanted Sammy to be a major part of everything going on. Now, I had I went to the Arco Arena Royal Rumble back in '93, so that was Royal Rumble number 6, and the excitement that was abound at Royal Rumble number 6. That's the first major pay-per-view that Sacramento ever had, and really one of the biggest pay-per-view events that Northern California ever had. Versus what has become of the Royal Rumble now, where it just feels so much like a tacked-on thing that, especially the moments where guys roll out of the ring and they're out of the ring for 5-10 minutes. Wow.
The one you saw in SAC?
Oh, I'm sorry?
Who won that Royal Rumble?
That one was won by Yokozuna, I believe. Yes. That was before Yokozuna got his title run. And they kind of built him up. And the main event was Bret Hart versus the recently departed Scott Hall for the world title. That actually was a really, really good main event. That was one of Scott Hall's best matches, in my opinion. He was Razor Ramon then, but it was phenomenal. That was one of the best matches I've ever seen live. And sorry for the cough, gentlemen. Everyone seems to have the Novato cough these days out here in my neighborhood. But
special announcement. Next week is the Russ Jackman Memorial Show right here on the.
Yeah, it might happen if it gets any worse. We'll see. I'm actually better than I was maybe about 2 weeks ago, and then felt better, and then it's kind of gone back. But what I was saying is that the Royal Rumble was such a look forward to event, and I just feel like yesterday it was really like one of those. I kind of barely even knew it was on. I knew that it was kind of building up to it, but I didn't really, mark my calendar for the Royal Rumble. It just feels.
Let me ask you guys something. They had a plethora of talent on all of these shows. They had 2 different wrestlers on Tamron Hall, Roman on the Tonight Show, etc. They had Charlotte Flair on the Today Show, I think Wednesday. But when it's not being offered anymore as a traditional pay-per-view, and now they call it, in fact, Becky Lynch was on somebody else's show, Kelly Clarkson, and she initially caught herself. She called it a pay-per-view, and then she had to go, a premium live event. So, I mean, if you get Peacock with all the movies and all the terrific stuff on there, I don't understand why the impetus is to place all, of course they're going to do that during Mania week, but why is this? And not all of them were NBC shows to where they could push Peacock. They just, like on Tamron Hall, which is an ABC property, they were, I don't think they said it's on Peacock. They just said it's a premium live event, and that was the end of it. So why place all of these stars on all of these? You know, they have to trans and do all these things.
It's still promoting WWE. It's still promoting their product, and
I guess it's brand recognition type stuff. Look at us. But back to the Rock thing, and Roman addressed that on the Tonight Show with Fallon. You know, they had the buzz, and unless something happens at this next pay-per-view, the February pay-per-view, because there's no March one, they go straight to Mania. I don't know. Why don't they just start, you know, if they're trying to, I guess, get people to subscribe to Peacock, say, well, you know, he'll be involved in a skit. If he's not wrestling Roman, he's going to be there. Like I got to see him, you know, with Ronda Rousey go and accost Triple H and Stephanie at the San Jose Santa Clara Mania in 2015. Well, whatever. I bet. Let me ask you two guys about the Bray Wyatt LA Knight thing. What?
It was absolute crap. It was like a bad acid trip. It was 3 minutes, and they absolutely buried LA Knight, and then this goof jumps off of some thing onto a giant mattress or whatever and misses him by 5 feet. It was an absolute fiasco.
And I heard they instead of using the good shot, they showed the replay with the shitty one that showed he missed by a mile, and then a little later they showed the good one instead of going to the good one in the replay, immediate replay. So it looked phony, and the Uncle Howdy character, was he supposed to have died in that thing, or what's going on? Or
it was incomprehensible. You could barely see it. It was over before you blinked, and all it did was basically destroy LA Knight. I mean, you can't take him seriously after a 3-minute disaster. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen in all my years of watching wrestling. It wasn't quite as bad as The Fiend and Seth Rollins, but it was pretty bad. What do you think, Rick?
The whole thing, I didn't know if Bray Wyatt thought he was at Burning Man or at like a rave in the 90s, you know. But yeah, it's like you said, it was a bad acid trip. I think that the Hardys and Decay in Impact in 2015 could have done the same kind of match and not had it look as hokey and corny. I don't think it was just the black lights that made it as stupid. I think it was visually kind of cool looking, and it could have been done better, you know? I know that Bray Wyatt
couldn't have been done worse.
No, obviously, but like it wasn't just the gimmick match that made it stupid. He did one gimmick where he's using like supernatural powers and not even doing wrestling moves. And on commentary, they aren't even like mentioning it. I remember this was like when he was still doing The Fiend, you know, before they set The Fiend on fire. Like the stuff they do with Bray Wyatt is so like, I don't
Juvenile.
Let me ask you guys, everybody's talking about the post Royal Rumble press conference. Is that on Peacock? Where do you go to watch that?
It was last night. It was right after the show.
So
I'm curious why pro wrestling, you know, press conferences are even necessary, but that's my personal opinion.
That's a take from New Japan. Every time I've been over there, or FMW did it in the 90s, 90 and 91.
Yeah, and no, I know it works there, but I feel like over here, you know,
well,
I don't personally.
The debacle with CM Punk, why Tony Khan, who's like the heart and soul of wrestling, you know, contributing all this great stuff, doing all of these things. I mean, he's the guy responsible for that very classy.
Did you feel so bad during that?
I'm sorry?
During that whole thing. But when
he was responsible for all of that. And, you know, he, in a short 3 years, the guy's revolutionized and made wrestling fun. I mean, as I've been bitching to Rick this week, who knows? It's like
I've been really enjoying those emails, by the way.
Much good stuff. Everybody's, even Impact has had to really crank it up. They've got Kushida making appearances there, and Jonathan Gresham, a big favorite. Rick had pointed this out to me too, that I'm pretty sure, yeah, Bryan Danielson was already with the company because he's been there over a year or thereabouts. Prior to Tony buying and saving Ring of Honor, Evan, maybe you have some thoughts on this. Why would you not want Jonathan Gresham, who Rick and I both agree, and Rick stated it, that he really was the class champion through the whole pandemic aspect of Ring of Honor? Why would you want to just have him immediately drop on the first Ring of Honor event for him under Tony Khan's ownership, literally job to, or drop immediately to Claudio rather than maybe...
My theory, and I don't know any more than anybody else, would be that Claudio's a bigger name and Jericho's a bigger name than Claudio, etc., so on. So if you're trying to get your show on another network or another slot, that would make sense to me, because as good, very good, great as Gresham is, he's just not the name the other guys are.
Yeah, so, but when the belt eventually went to Jericho, we still don't have Ring of Honor TV. We still don't have...
But they're working towards it.
There'll be a show.
They are hoping to get that eventually. So, look, I'm just happy Ring of Honor exists.
Yeah, Claudio, right, true. Claudio hasn't been on their television in at least 3, maybe 4 weeks, which is bumming me out. There's a whole nother discussion, and Rick added some names to that.
They have a Disco tribute show.
Yeah, when somebody is off TV for as many months with an injury as, the women's champion, it was kind of sucked the way they had to take the title from her when they named her, they allowed her to continue to be champion, and Tony Storm was interim. But why not show a 20-second vignette of what Thunder Rosa, for example, is doing, like in the gym, working on her back, going to back doctors, just let people know she's still alive. And the same with Miro. And who else, Rick, am I leaving off the... Yeah, some people that haven't seen. Yeah, Jeff Hardy, And let me just say this. Let's congratulate or throw flowers to Matt Hardy, the genius for cinematic matches. Of course, in the Impact days with the Hardys versus Decay, and I think they had some other cinematic stuff, but that's all through... We wouldn't have that stuff. We wouldn't have Undertaker's last match with AJ Styles if it weren't for the genius of Matt Hardy doing all that stuff and creating that, because we never had cinematic matches before, and that is what they should have done with this Bray thing last night.
I said he could have had that match and it wouldn't have been stupid. I think he could have actually pulled that match off, because
they had the cinematic thing with Cena and Bray Wyatt. Remember that one a couple of years ago? That was fun. Yeah. It was okay, for what
I saw Bray Wyatt headline the Garden twice against Roman Reigns one night and Cena the other night. He was totally over. The matches were excellent, and I'm not a huge WWE fan. Excellent matches. It's like they throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like, just let the guy wrestle. He's a great wrestler with charisma, and he draws. It's like, why do you need all this nonsense? Absolute nonsense. That thing last night was just, it was like a bad dream. It's like, what is this? Why are they doing this? Why is it so horrible? What?
Wait, was there no Bray or mysticism in the what's her face? The blonde one that was challenging Bianca Belair
There wasn't again. After she lost, they did a little something on the Tron with Uncle Howdy. Like they did a video afterwards.
And that match was mediocre at best.
Yeah, I heard that people weren't into that. They wanted to go right to the women's battle royal.
And that's another thing too, is when you have the women's battle royal and then you have the men's battle royal. I think it's really difficult to have 2 battle royales on the same card,
especially when you know the result. It's 2 matches.
But the men's opened the show. The men's was the very first match on the card. I forget the placement of the.
Right, and so the women's battle royal there was very little novelty to it. That you see, battle royales don't have that much variance to them. I mean, you're all trying to throw someone over the top rope, and somebody pretends not to hit the floor, and then you have some people that do go to the floor early. And
the problem with the two WWEs last night was there weren't as many surprises as I guess people had hoped.
None. It was very predictable.
Yeah, Brock comes out. He was he was tossed out by Lashley, I guess, to throw a bone to Lashley, but he wasn't even in the match that long. And how many millions?
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Yeah. Who else was an in and out? Chelsea Green in the women's. You know, she's Matt Cardona's wife. She was out in a second.
Yeah.
But when you already have the men's battle royale, and that's what everyone's supposed to care about. Then you have the women's battle royale, which took about an hour to run through, right? And by the time you've already gone through the men's battle royale, you've already cared about, ostensibly over who won and who didn't. When you get to the women's battle royale, and you're just like, can you get it over with? That's more the feeling that I got was like, when is this going to end? Versus being into it, because you're like, we've seen all the types of spots that you can have happen. I think they should either do the women's battle royale before the show as like a pre-show type match,
different night.
Yeah, or just not even have it, or wait till Monday night.
They need what was the name of the pay-per-view where it was just nothing but WWE women and they brought in all kinds of people. It was a terrific pay-per-view. Why not have more of those?
This will never be on Saudi Arabia pay-per-view. Yes.
Well, if they buy, nobody knows yet if anybody's going to buy. All the rumor mill's kind of been quiet the last week on if WWE's for sale, if the Saudis or.
What's your thought on that, Rick? What's your thought on?
I'm starting to think maybe it was just a hoax to get Vince back in. Oh yeah, I'm coming back to take care of the sale, but they're not really selling. He's just coming
Rick,
back.
I have to ask you this: are you happier with the product that Hunter has put out for the last 7 months versus Vince coming back, which is a scary?
I mean, at first, it was nice to hear things like them being able to say words like wrestling again and belt and things like it was ridiculous that they couldn't, But I mean, it still is what it is. I mean, that show last night was, pretty, mediocre. If at best.
But wasn't the Steen Roman match at least the saving grace? It was a good match, would you say?
No. The match was, I mean, I'd say it was 3 3/4, if not. I mean, it was a good match, but I'm not gonna say, oh, thank God Triple H is back. He saved the day, this is amazing. I mean, I was really hopeful because his brand of NXT before Vince and Bruce Pritchard, raped and pillaged it last year.
Great.
And it not totally recovered. I mean, I really loved it. I really enjoyed, that heck out of it.
Keith Lee was at his absolute best in the black and gold.
His matches with Dijak, were those not phenomenal?
They're fantastic matches. There was all kinds of great stuff. Kushida wasn't jobbing every time. No wonder he left. It was how can you a golden talent like that? And
some of Tommaso Ciampa's best work ever. I thought it was absolutely.
Where's Ciampa? I know he's injured. Yeah, what a shame. All of the stuff with Gargano and Ciampa, that was great stuff. Great stuff, all of it.
Last night.
The hope was, so they're going to put him in charge. WWE's going to be like that. And obviously that's not the case.
Well, so corporate. Evan, what were you going to say? It's a corporate.
It was 3.5 stultifying hours leading to a meeting.
It was 4 hours.
Wait, you didn't let me finish. 3.5 stultifying hours leading to a mediocre live musical performance. And then Reigns and Owens had a 3.5 star, very, very good match, followed by a great angle. But that last 20 or 30 minutes did not salvage a 4-hour plus slog, through.
What was the music thing? I didn't hear there was a music.
There was a band that, it was
like a poor man's Kid Rock.
Yeah.
Oh, really? It wasn't the real Kid Rock?
No,
it was a band called
Hottie
at first.
Well, let me throw out some stuff.
I think Russ just passed away. I don't know. There he is. I was getting ready for the memorial show next week.
Let me ask.
But I am muting myself, so I'm not coughing all the time during the show. I don't think you want that as an input.
But you're not turning now that The Walking Dead is gone. You're not turning.
Exactly. It's they're gonna have a show with me, which is the sitting back and doing nothing dead.
Yes.
Let me throw some quick things out there. I want to thank friend of the show, Benny Scala, for all he does. Great friend.
Benny's a good guy. I like that guy.
I want to say watch on Showtime, or, if you have satellites, I think you could even just bring it up on video on demand for free. The George Jones, Tammy Wynette documentary, only because the very last episode is entitled Justified and Ancient, which was this insane song that Tammy Wynette did before she died with like an African hip hop band. And that was the name of the song. And it is incredible. You got to go to YouTube and look at that music video. It's, even though it was probably 87, 88, I mean, it really made her happening. And it was.
Did she body slam somebody? Because how does that have to do with wrestling?
It's just the production, all of the stuff in the music video, and the overall. If you want suspense and all of that, which we like in wrestling, we like storytelling. That's the ultimate pinnacle thing. I most say today. That is in that docuseries. That's why I'm throwing that out there. And it was just very cool. That's what they keep talking about. And so much of the movies I'm seeing, these comic book movies, there's not a lot of really great storytelling other than Iron Man or something. There are some more on the Marvel side, sadly, than the DC side. But that's what you're getting. I mean, that's the big talk for WWE is basically the one big storyline they've done for 9 months. Sammy, Roman, the Bloodline. Why isn't Nia Jax part of the Bloodline? I've said that because
she's not over. She's last night she didn't get over at all.
She got over the top rope.
Yeah.
Who tossed her out? She came in 30th, and who tossed her out, guys?
They all ganged up on her.
Oh, okay. Was that the show that they were pissed off at her for being reckless and injuring some of them?
Yeah. She injured a lot of people, I heard. At the time, I really wasn't watching main roster WWE at the time, so I don't know specifically who she hurt, but that was one of the things the internet liked to pick on her.
Let me ask who was not on the show. Was Becky Lynch, did she wrestle a match last night?
She was in the Women's Battle Royale.
Yeah.
Really? And anything remarkable with her? Was she in it a long time? Or
she came out and beat up that trio. What's their names, Rick?
Damage control.
Yeah. So she.
Okay. What about, did Charlotte have a role? Anything at all?
There at all.
Nothing there at all. And the Usos weren't used except in the big angle. They didn't wrestle.
Right.
But Jay's doing really good. He really showed a lot in that whole angle.
I think they should eventually have the two Usos wrestle each other. That would be a draw.
They have before, haven't they?
I don't know.
When this whole thing, like the whole bloodline was first.
Right. When Jimmy had not turned face yet, and Jay was our heel, and he was accusing him of ass kissing Roman.
Yeah.
Both of them are tremendous. So, I mean, that's the biggest story in American wrestling, at least. Whereas if you look at, and I'm raving about Omega and Ospreay, I'm still raving about that match, which you could watch. I know it was probably edited down when they showed it on Access, but that was easy a match of the year, and that was just January 4th or whatever it was. That was I hope all of you guys saw that, because Ospreay Omega was
unbelievable. It was great.
And it eclipsed the actual main event of Wrestle Kingdom. I thought was kind of mediocre. Okada and Jay.
Actually, Okada and Jay White was a 4.25 star match. It's just the Omega Ospreay match blew it away. It was very good match.
But I don't think Jay White is the best opponent to showcase all that Okada can do, because Okada is just head and shoulders. Obviously, Jay White has improved a lot. He came out of their dojo system, I think. years ago, because I was there shooting at the Cow Palace event, and that's when Jay worked with Juice Robinson. You know, that was a U.S. title match. On top was Cody Omega, which is terrific, and the ladders and all that stuff. But I don't know if Jay White is, you know, let's feed. Why isn't Sonata, Rick? Let me throw that. Why is Sonata not in that upper tier with Naito and Okada and Jay White? I thought that's what they were going to position Sonata to be, main event guy, and he's kind of, you know, he's got all the talent in the world to be in these main events, but he's just not in them, and I'm not sure why.
In New Japan?
Yes.
In the New Japan main events, I really couldn't tell you.
Because who's the other in New Japan? I don't even know if Tanahashi's in there anymore. It's Okada. It's Jay White, obviously, Ospreay, and Naito, definitely. But it's like the big four. Can you think of anybody else? Is Tanahashi?
I watched that Wrestle Kingdom because of that, you know, tremendous main event. But I really do not keep up on New Japan besides that, you know.
I think that's what that.
So I couldn't give you a really educated answer for that, unfortunately.
I also wanted to talk about the upcoming match between Bryan Danielson and Timothy Thatcher.
That is going to
be fun. They both have APW history for us. Obviously, we know Bryan Danielson won King of the Indies, which begat Birth Ring of Honor. And Tim Thatcher was, you know, he's a NorCal guy.
Yeah, I worked a lot of shows with him. He worked for California Championship Wrestling for about 2 years.
APW million shows like Oliver John, where they had like a 20-minute headlock at the Gym Wars garage. That Evan, I wish you would have seen it, because it was every bit they were trying to replicate what Johnny Valentine and I think it was Jack Briscoe did in Tampa in like 1971, where it was just like a headlock for 20 minutes and the audience was going out of their minds. And that's what they did in the APW garage, Evan. You brought Tiger Khan to, and it was just what Russ is describing with Oliver John and Tim Thatcher. Tremendous. You remember Tim Thatcher when he was doing like a poor man's Steve Regal, where he was the British Messiah. And the guy is a great kid. He's really, really, really got one of the best attitudes of anyone I've worked with. He worked shows where we had 30 people in the audience, and he gave it his all, and he always had a great attitude. He was never the only other guy that I know of that just didn't care how big the audience was, and he always gave 100% would be Christopher Daniels. He has that same kind of working attitude that Christopher Daniels has, and I hope he has as long a career as Christopher Daniels has. Before we close up the show, back to the aftermath of Mark Briscoe defeating Jay Lethal. Chris Daniels led the thing at the top of the ramp with all the talent, particularly the Ring of Honor guys, and it was nice to see the armbands, even in WWE, the folks that had worked with Jay and Mark Briscoe. But the referee crying, who was the longtime Ring of Honor lead official, and Andrade had tears in his eyes, and obviously when Jay Lethal first came out, he was the first guy to cry, and it was a lot of emotion. It was, very difficult. You could see what a brother Jay Briscoe was to those guys, and Tony Khan came out just for a second, got a hug, and then he left. Just a class guy, and thank you to Tony Khan for putting that on. And we're going to have before I forget, Tim Thatcher against Bryan Danielson. That's going to be, I don't think they've ever worked. Have they ever worked together? No, never. No, it's going to be mega.
I think it is. Hey, Rick, do you want to give us a little bit of information about your podcast and how people can listen to it?
Facebook page.
Yeah, I don't have a podcast. This is I just have a Facebook page. Like I was saying, I privileged that you guys even wanted me on here,
It's called, it's fake, right?
Yeah, it's just called, it's fake, right? It's just one that I made up just because I found on Facebook that it's so people could get so toxic. So I wanted to make one where, it was, you could just talk, safely with people without them, if you have a different opinion from someone, people tend to just get very, sort of looking for, hateful, and it's really just the same dozen idiots just chit-chatting with each other, you know. But if anyone wants that's seeing this, if you want to come, you know, join, please, you know, join in. If your, you know, opinion's different from mine, feel free to call me a stupid Mark or
No, it's we should support each other. You can have a disagreement and not be toxic, attack somebody.
No, and that's that's the point I'm trying to.
For that, we need more of this. Like in the tape trading days, late 70s, 80s, nobody was picking on each other or trashing one another. It was, oh, you should really see this match from Japan or Kansas City or Amarillo.
But trashing Feinstein, they deserved it.
I think there should be more of that and less of the, you know, toxic thing, you know? Like, I feel there needs to be, like, less of, like, people just, like, assume, like, when they hear you're a wrestling fan, they think you're, like, some 500-pound neckbeard who lives in his mother's basement, you know, and, like, everyone wants to hate
look
each
at all
other.
the movie stars. Look at all the movie stars that love wrestling and the folks that come to, you know, big events.
49ers own George Kittle, huge fan of wrestling.
The guy from the Oakland A's, and there was a Dodgers guy that actually wrestled. But the Oakland A's, they had that guy that worked on Iceboxes shows in Northern California. You know, loved it when he wasn't. And A's allowed him to. I'm sure they didn't want him to because he was still an active player. He was a top player for the A's at the time, as an outfielder and great hitter. I can't think of his name now. This is about 6-7 years ago. But, you know, tons of people, celebrity-wise, and look at Maria Menounos, one of the most beautiful from Entertainment Tonight. She loves it. Huge Mark.
Huge Bob Backlund fan, right?
Yeah.
I also want to give a shout out for when he returned from California on his Facebook page, a couple of really great interviews that I think our fans should check out from Evan's Facebook page, since we have a lot of folks who are Evan fans, and if they hadn't checked out those interviews, a lot of great stuff from guests that we have had on the show before, and they gave some extra in-depth stuff that I really enjoyed. That was really good.
Thank you. Yeah, I interviewed Brian Walsh, who you may remember from Raw very early on, and Walsh was trained by Killer Kowalski. He headlined throughout Europe, headlined on the Indies, and you know, people have this weird, people do the just the jobber thing, which is certainly not the case. And he went back and forth with Shawn Michaels. He had Michaels down for like a 2.5 count, you know, if you remember that match. And I also interviewed Mark Nowatarski, who did the Sheik and the Detroit wrestling documentaries. And I also met with Jeff Archer, my production guy, and my book will be out this year. It's called Wrestling Rings, Blackboards, and Movie Sets. It's 100 stories about my life and some of the amazing people I've worked with and been friends with. And there's multiple pieces on the making of The Wrestler I was associate producer on. So it's finally going to be out. My production guy, Jeff Archer, his wife died. His best friend died. He's had health problems. That's why it's taken this long. It's been over 2 years.
It'll be worth the wait. That's for sure. And then, Rick, how can people get a hold of you through social media?
Just through my Facebook page, which is you know, I spell my first name the same way the Nature Boy does, and my last name is Newman, like the guy from Seinfeld.
That's how we should have introduced him. Hello, Newman.
Hello, Newman. Yeah.
It's a new one. I haven't heard that.
Well, great, Rick. We've loved having you on the show, and
I love being on. Thank you guys so much. I hope we could do it again. I'm sorry for all the hiccups in the beginning.
Yeah.
We'll have you on again. Absolutely, it's great to have you as a guest, and want to thank everybody for their contributions this week. We're gonna wrap it up now, and we'll see everyone in the near future for you, Rick, and same with you, Evan. Love having you back on the show.
And
Goodbye, Newman.
California loved having Evan that whole not quite 2 weeks, but a week and a half. Everybody saw it, like Rick and I got to see Evan, and
hopefully next time the weather
Very thankful we got to spend some time because I haven't seen Evan in life in 20 years.
Yeah. I saw this Trump guy and this left winger have a fist fight on Pacific Beach. The guy's pouring blood. It was insane. It was
When
more
you
exciting
said that
than
post, I was like, oh, I bet you that happened in California. I bet you that happened before he left.
And it wasn't a GCW match. It wasn't GCW either.
Yeah, well, book him for the next Royal Rumble as the main event.
Then they knocked down some old guy. It was crazy.
Oh,
Crazy stuff. Glad to hear you made it back okay to the East Coast, and we'll see everybody next week. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, so much. Good night.
What to say, everybody?
Okay.